The first question this week is more overload with less fatigue is even possible? And it's coming from the idea that doesn't more overload inherently come with more fatigue? And I think that this is definitely a valid question for sure. However, I think it is absolutely possible. All right. So, for example, let's say someone does 3 sets of Bosu ball squats supersetted with burpees in a very hot environment. That's going to be very fatiguing. But how much of a overloading stimulus is that going to be on the quads? Probably not much. And then compare that to 3 sets of just regular squats with a regular rest time, with nothing supersetted, normal environment. That's going to be quite a bit less fatiguing, but much more overloading on the quads. So I think you can definitely have more overload with less fatigue. Now, I think that potentially it gets a little bit trickier when you're just looking at peripheral overload. So is it possible to overload your quads more with less fatigue, if that makes sense? And I think in that situation, it might be a little inherent. So I have a hard time thinking up an example to where you could overload your quads more with getting less fatigue on your quads, if that makes sense. Because what I'm talking about is you can absolutely have more overloading muscle stimulus with less overall kind of systemic fatigue, like in the example I said. But I have a hard time seeing there be more overloading quad stimulus with less quad fatigue, if that makes sense. And I think in that situation, it becomes a little bit more inherent. All right? So that is question number one. Question number two, thoughts on compression gear. Meh. I think that it's shown to potentially help recovery, and there's a decent amount of evidence for that. However, the magnitude of effect is so small, meaning the amount of enhanced recovery that you're actually going to get is so small to that I think that it's somewhat of a waste of time to really worry about for most people, and most people are going to do much better with just focusing on enough sleep, managing stress, and really those two right there. All right? So I think that's all I have to say about that. So question number three, how much caffeine is too much? So I think that this is going to be very individual dependent because some people process and metabolize caffeine much more rapidly than others, and some people are slower metabolizers and stuff like that. In my experience, staying around 2 to 3 milligrams per kilogram is about right. So if I weigh 80 kilos, I'm probably not going to go over about 200, 240 milligrams of caffeine. But I also think I tend to fall on the side of being a slower metabolizer, to where like if I have caffeine after like 12 p.m., I will notice it influences my sleep. But I also go to bed at like 9 o'clock, but I also get up at like 4 o'clock. So it evens out. Anyways, that's kind of the range that I like. And I think that make sure to pay attention to your caffeine intake, because I know that in the past, I have thought that I was getting kind of overtrained or maybe overreaching a little bit, or maybe even like that I'm getting too lean to the point to where I start seeing disturbances in sleep and stuff like that, and my sleep was affected. And then I was like, hey, what if I just kind of back off on my caffeine a little bit and see maybe that's affecting things? And that is 100% what it was. I backed my caffeine down to that 2 to 3 milligram range. Didn't notice any effect on sleep. Started sleeping better. Now, could there be some placebo in there of just me focusing on less caffeine? Did that make me believe that I was then going to get better sleep and then get better sleep because of that? Could have been. But it seems as though that was playing some sort of role, all right? So I like the 2 to 3 milligrams per kilo as kind of a general range that works pretty well for most people. And then if you personally find that you're fine with a little bit more, great. I think that's fine. But pay attention to it. There was a study done on like over 100 different servings of coffee. And it was around different coffee shops and instant coffees and stuff like that. And there was a range of like, I don't remember exactly, but like threefold differences to where a serving of coffee somewhere was like 100 milligrams compared to 300 somewhere else. So that could be drastically different. Like on one end, if you're like, okay, I can have 3 servings of coffee a day. Well, if it has 300 milligrams per cup, man, that's quite a bit. But if it has 100, then you might be totally fine. So pay attention to it. Don't get too carried away with that, all right? Question number 4. What are my favorite stimulus to fatigue ratio exercises per muscle? So me personally, what exercises do I feel provide me a lot of stimulus compared to like overall systemic fatigue per muscle group? And for me personally, I'll run through these. For the chest, man, my number one, it's going to sound like such a bro, but probably the good old single arm pec fly. And specifically the single arm because I can really anchor myself with my other arm. So I can hold on to something else to anchor myself. And then my range of motion, I can really kind of come across that chest and really squeeze that end range of motion. And I think that for me, that is like the number one stimulus to fatigue ratio for my pecs. For my back, I got to give it to the low to high chest supported cable row, which if you aren't as lucky as me and you don't get to train in a gym all by yourself. Now, granted, I live in a town of like 5,000 people, so there's not a whole lot going on here, and I am going to be moving soon. But it might be more of a son of a bitch to set that up. But that's my favorite. Single arm, can really focus on each side. Chest supported, keeps that low back all fresh. And yeah, that's a solid one. Delts, good old dumbbell lateral raise. My good old standby. I've done the cable lateral raise. It's fine, but I just like to stick to that bread and butter. For biceps, I would say just the good old dumbbell curl. Even the incline dumbbell curl to where you get a little bit more of that range of motion from hanging your arm behind you a little bit. I also like that. But the good old dumbbell curl, I personally don't like the barbell curl that much for myself. I just think it stops that range of motion a little bit, and I don't love it, but it's a fine exercise. Dumbbell curl for those. Triceps, the incline skull crusher. So where you set up on an incline, my range of motion on that is fantastic, and that's just a good all-around exercise for me. For my quads, I would say Smith squats. For my glutes, I would say Smith lunges because you can really stabilize on the Smith and just focus on the glutes there. For hamstrings, I would say a barbell RDL or a hamstring curl is good. And I think that that's pretty much all the muscle groups, right? So those are what I found are really solid. Some of my clients like some of those movements and some of my clients don't. So when searching for your own exercises that you like, make sure to give exercises their fair shake. Like try them out for a full mesocycle. But if you're noticing that, man, my mind-muscle connection on this sucks, I don't get a good pump after it, I'm not progressing well with it, and it just kind of hurts my joints, toss that out and move on to the next one that's a good staple for you, all right? And the final question. It's kind of a fun question. This was asked by my best friend over on the Instagram, Brent. I don't think he watches these. If you do, Brent, I appreciate it. But anyways, he asked me, Who would win in a fight? A gorilla or a bear? And come on, the easy answer. So easy. They're so much bigger. Plus, they don't get a lot of food, so they're hungry and they'll just get after it. And the correct answer to this question is a polar bear. Hands down. All right. See you next Sunday.